Exciting stuff.
Welcome back to the Fine Print. I am joined again by Tim Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions for part 2 of our previous interview. Tim, thanks for coming right back.
No problem, man.
After my free Zoom has lapsed. Okay. Now, Tim, you're a cannabis user, as I've noticed.
Not me. Never touched this stuff ever.
Has the cannabis helped you stay clean?
Oh, it has. I mean, without a doubt. Cannabis is my thing. I don't really drink much alcohol, and I don't. It's not like I'm a teetotaler, never drink. I'll have a drink if I'm out with everybody and having dinner. I'll have a glass of wine or something. Very occasionally, I'll have a beer at a show, or I'll have a Rebel and vodka. But I very, very rarely drink. It's just not my thing. I don't like it. I never have more than one. I don't like being drunk. I don't like the feeling of being drunk. I love being stoned. I'm a very intense person. I'm a very emotional person. I get very riled up about things. Pot is my medication, man. It's, I don't smoke during the day. I don't smoke at work. I don't smoke when I have, legal work to do. But when I get home, man, it's what lets me not have a blood pressure of, 220 right now.
Is your work very stressful, Tim?
Huh?
Is your work very stressful?
It's incredibly stressful. It's incredibly stressful. Law in general is stressful.
I have some friends that are lawyers, and I
mean, I guess it depends on the type of law you're doing, but any type of law, you're impacting people's lives. And if you fuck up, depending on what you're doing, it can be a real headache, or it can mean someone going to prison for 20 years, which is what I was doing. Criminal defense is incredibly stressful. But one of the nice things about law is that you know what you got, what you're dealing with. You got precedent, you have case law. You can look, you can make intelligent decisions based on established precedent and established decisions. Not getting into cannabis law, we ain't got shit. We are all winging because it's a brand new area. We're taking a substance that for the last 70 years has been illegal, for the last 50 years, very illegal. Yeah. And now legalizing it at one level, but not the other.
So let me, sorry to interrupt you, man, but let me ask you, I feel like as soon as the retail market's open, you guys might get hit with a flood of claims or cases, or, they were selling this with, didn't have a proper label or things like that. Are you guys prepared to handle that potential flood of litigation that might be coming down the pike?
I don't think it's going to be so much litigation. Are there going to be regulatory violations? Yes. We are, again, we're not Massachusetts. Like, these guys are not, our Cannabis Control Board is not looking to make this difficult. I've talked to James Pepper, the chair, for the first 2 years, especially, the entire emphasis is going to be education, not enforcement. They understand it's brand new. They're not going to be coming in there and dropping a hammer on people because the blue card was supposed to be in the red card slot type thing. They'll say, hey, your blue card was supposed to be in the blue card, and they'll show you and make sure you get it right. But it's about education and compliance, not enforcement. Certain things, yes, if you're running an illegal operation, or you're selling to kids, or you're selling crack cocaine out of your dispensary, yeah, you're fucked. I mean, let's be real here.
Don't sell crack. I just want to say that for my.
If people are making a good faith effort to be in compliance, that is what is going to be, looked at, and they are going to be working with people. Our regulatory structure, I mean, our dispensary regulations, 2 pages. This is there's almost 100 in Massachusetts, over 200 in California. It's crazy. We are very lightly regulated. Now, a couple of regulations suck, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, we have unbelievable amount of autonomy.
Can I stop you there for a second? You said a couple of the regulations suck. This is a question I've been asking everyone. If you could rewrite the legislation, what would you keep and what would you change or throw away?
Well, THC caps to be out immediately. I mean, I think that's the one thing we can all agree on. Everybody, apparently, except for the Vermont Department of Health, seems to realize this.
Who at the Department of Health? Have you spoken to anyone over there?
Well, again, no. Yeah. It's a great question.
I have some connections over there, and I'd love to ask them about it.
I have not spoken to anybody about the THC cap issue. I have spoken, however, recently to them about, or communicated with their legal advisor regarding their position on THC edibles, which if you want to hear a great story, got a few minutes, you're going to get a kick out of this one.
We got half an hour, man. Send it. Yeah, please do.
We've just found out that edibles, as of today, and of course, because this is cannabis and things could change like this, but as of right now, the Vermont Department of Health's official position is now they will not license, regulate, inspect, or basically have anything to do with any THC edible manufacturer.
As of today?
It is their position. This came out last week. It is their position that it's completely regulated by the CCB. So no commercial kitchens are required. There'll be no food inspections. There'll be no health and safety inspections by the Department of Health for THC edible manufacturers. Now, all products need to be tested by a third-party independent test with a CO. So that does serve as an important check and balance. But I mean, that blew our minds. We were fully expecting all of our edible manufacturers have to be in compliance with the Department of Health.
Sure, yeah.
That's
been something that I've been following a lot, and especially, I mean, I know I'll leave their name out of it, but I ran into you at an event a few weeks ago, and certainly we were discussing some things of that nature. And
well, location's been a real impediment to a lot of people. Now this doesn't absolve you from zoning, but if you're an edible manufacturer and you can find a commercially zoned building, you can now go in there and make your edibles.
Can you talk about some of the zoning issues? I assume that you've had some of those with your clients.
Yes, we've done 6 conditional use hearings so far now.
Could you please talk a little bit about those struggles?
Well, the good news, the short story is we've won every one. The short story is that zoning, as much of a pain in the ass as it is a very black and white thing, and the state has gone out of its way to make. Let's put it this way: they have not given municipalities a lot of control. We'll just leave it at that, and that was very wisely done. Municipalities can regulate cannabis businesses in the same manner as any other business, meaning there can be no special district zones or rules made up for cannabis. They can regulate it for zoning and nuisance, and that is it. They can't say yes. They can. I know, obviously, the opposite.
What's nuisance? What could you explain the nuisance part a little bit?
Nuisance laws, or municipalities under state law are given the right to regulate businesses which may create a nuisance. So nuisance is generally held to be odor, noise, light, traffic, anything that could disturb the neighbors. That's considered nuisance. And so a town could say, if there's a viable, if you're just cranking out indoor growing and you're just venting right outside and it just smells like cannabis everywhere, that is something a municipality could potentially do something about.
What about with like a farm where it smells like cow shit everywhere? Because I drive by a lot of those, and I don't hate the smell of cow shit. I actually kind of like it, but some people don't like that.
No, of course not. And
how is that different?
This is a huge piece of remember cannabis farming is not agriculture, it's not farming. Well, now, unfortunately, if you're a tier 1 outdoor cultivator on farmland, it's farming. Vermont has what's known as a right to farm bill. The right to farm bill gives a state recognition to agricultural and farming practices as exempt from nuisance and zoning. Also Act 250, also fire marshal purview. Basically, all the pain in the ass state inspections are waived if you are a farmer. So when we all heard, oh, it's not farming, it's not agriculture, what the legislature actually did was this: if we consider this farming, we will have no ability to regulate marijuana cultivation because it would be under the right to farm bill. We couldn't tell people where they could do it. They could put it right next to schools. They could put it right next to churches. They could put it everywhere. We couldn't put security measures. We couldn't regulate.
That was the argument, huh?
Well, that's the truth. They wouldn't be able to. And there were certain federal tax subsidies that come in for farming and agriculture that they may have lost because of the federal illegality. So what they did was they said, for the purposes of Vermont's right to farm bill, and for the purposes of these several federal tax benefits, we are considering cannabis not farming. That does not mean it's not agricultural activity. And they specifically said this has nothing to do with local zoning determination. rural Vermont had some great points, and it did. It screwed, and and the new bill 188 allows now farmers can have 1,000 square foot or 125 plants outdoors with no regulation. That's fucking fantastic for those who have registered farmland.
Sure.
So, but local zoning, if you get a zoning administrator, so zoning is so municipal based. A town has full control over their zoning and their decisions. You can appeal them, but they take forever. So you really need to get on good with the town. You get a town with a zoning administrator who smokes and who's pro cannabis. He's like, no problem, get you all zoned up, you're all set. You get a zoning administrator who's a prohibitionist, and unfortunately, a lot of the zoning administrators are retired white men in rural
had that
Vermont.
in Lyndonville. When I was in Lyndonville, like 7-8 years ago, they were pro. What they were planning to do was preemptively ban a dispensary from coming to town. No one was even presenting the idea of bringing a dispensary there. They were just saying, hey, you know what? Some people are talking about this and we'd like to preemptively ban it. And it's like, why? Why would you do that?
A lot of these cases, Caleb, in these small towns, you hear this, and again, it's a natural tendency to want to generalize, but it's not. It's one or two people. It's the chairman of the select board and probably his cousin, who's the vice chair in these small towns. I mean, absolutely, a lot of families. You get a town clerk who doesn't like it, and a zoning administrator, and that's it. In Newport is a prime example of this. There was a police chief in Newport who was one of the rabid anti-prohibitionists. He got and was very good friends with several select board members, got his buddies all together, and they banned adult use retail in Newport before, back in like 2016. A new police chief, he got fired. A new police chief came in, and all of a sudden there was no desire to ban it anymore. Like a lot of times, one or two individuals can really spearhead this. And how many people pay attention to town government?
Well, when you live in a small town, like in Vermont, a few people can really spearhead that.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, me and my buddy were the only people there at that meeting who said anything about it. And we were in support of retail cannabis. Nobody else was there in favor of it. The next time we went, one lady showed up and she said, well, I don't want it. And I was like, okay, well, we do. And there's two of us. So now it's 2 against 1. So what are we doing here? Like, is this a democracy or where are we at? But like, it's interesting to see the old, and I don't want to single out conservatives, but there's a lot of old conservatives in these little pockets, especially in the Northeast Kingdom in Lyndonville. And even they're starting to see the dollar signs on the walls now. And they're like, well, maybe we should allow it. Maybe
more and more so. The stigma is going away. But I mean, you could almost look, it's not even, it's one of the few issues that the right and the left actually tend to be about equal on. Like this, it's age. If you look at the age demographics of prohibitionists versus, legalization advocates, over when you hit 65 and over, the numbers just plummet for support. Because these people, this age group has been indoctrinated into this. They've heard it their whole lives. And now to acknowledge that, they were wrong, this is why judges, law enforcement, can you imagine being a judge who you've just for the last 20 years destroyed lives, ruined lives, sent people to prison for God only knows how many years, seen families torn apart over, marijuana cases in the federal system that you've prosecuted. And now to have to accept that you were wrong, that it was all wrong, that you destroyed those lives for nothing. I can understand why that's a very difficult mindset for these federal judges to get into. Judges who I have a lot of respect for, who yet are
even
still
prosecutors too. I think.
Yeah, of course. Hey, it's a mental defense. Otherwise, you have to fucking acknowledge the fact that you have destroyed hundreds of lives,
all the way down the line to the cops. I think who and that's very hard. Because to admit that you made a mistake that might have impacted someone's life in that way is that's a rough mistake to admit.
It's heavy. It's a lot on it. And that's just doing criminal defense, seeing some of my clients get prosecuted and have to go to prison for this. It ripped my heart out every time. I couldn't stand it. So I had to get out of it. It was killing me, man. The system stacked against the poor. And there's so many, broken parts. But
do you think the board is doing a good job?
I think they are doing the best job they can with unbelievably limited resources. I think they've made some very poor decisions, and I think they've made some very good decisions.
What are some of the good decisions you think they made, and what are some of the poor decisions?
Listening to the people, taking a good amount of time for public comment, taking it seriously, fighting for what they believe and not simply being a rubber stamp of the legislature. Advocating and fighting to get those caps removed, not just falling in lockstep with, the legislature says we have to have them. James Pepper's actively fighting them. I think they've done a good job in limiting the regulation to just what the legislature requires. They have not gone over. They have full ability to do so. The legislature sets the floor for regulatory oversight, and the CCB went there without adding anything extra. They aren't telling people you need a vestibule or you need a counter to be 6 feet high. You look at how micromanaged some state cannabis frameworks are. We none of that, nothing. It's really incredible. Once operators are operating, it's going to be a dream come true in terms of what they have to do to stay in compliance. It's not much, and it's a lot of common sense shit. Keep track of your inventory. Don't sell to minors. Keep your doors locked. It's not tough stuff.
Can we talk about the banking for a minute, Tim? Because this is something that is a huge piece right now, and quite frankly, I'm a journalist, so I'm neutral on everything. But I got to tell you, right now seems like a fishy fucking moment for a merger between the two biggest credit unions in Vermont.
Has the merger been planned? Yes. Is cannabis really that big of a deal to any of these businesses? No. They're $1 billion and $1.3 billion credit unions. Cannabis would make up a fraction of their overall portfolios. Does one have anything to do with the other than timing? I doubt it. I talked to the people involved. I know Greg Huseman, who's the head of the cannabis. They pretty much isolated him off. He was one of the executives. He is now in charge of their cannabis division. I talk to him frequently. I've known him for, he was willing to bank hemp and CBD. I didn't know about the New England Federal Credit Union's proposal. Like, they had never reached out to us about this. We've talked to a couple banks. So I thought it was definitely coincidence that they're merging. They're both doing cannabis. This is another issue. I have to try to stay as neutral as I can too, because I see both sides of it.
What?
5 years ago, there were no banks. Everything was in cash. Good fucking luck. So the fact that there is even banking, and the fact that the SEC was talking about giving banking loans, love it, hate it, whatever, that in and of itself needs to be acknowledged as extraordinary. Not as much, there is a cannabis credit union now that's hit $1 billion capitalization in Colorado, and there are some banking institutions in Massachusetts. Because the thing that people don't realize is the Department of Treasury, their enforcement network, the cops, so to say, the Department of Treasury, is an entity known as FinCEN, which is the Financial Crime Control Network. They are the ones, and they basically go after money laundering. That's their big thing. Drug money, money laundering, terrorist funding. They're the money cops. They put out guidance which lets banks bank the cannabis industry legally. But in order to do so, I'm just going to give you a couple of there's a whole list of requirements, just a handful of them.
Yeah, please do.
For a cannabis business, or what they call MRBs, or marijuana related businesses in the Department of Treasury lingo,
the parlance of our time.
MRB accounts, they must be separated out from every other bank, every other account and bank, first and foremost. So they have to be in their completely and totally separate silo, separate computer system. They can't intermingle. All the records are kept different. Everything needs to be completely and totally separated. Every account needs to have what's known as a suspicious activity report, or an SAR generated. That's a report that goes to the Department of Treasury. One is not, and these are MRB SARs, so they're not actionable on every single, but every single transaction, meaning every time somebody spends a cent in that dispensary, or that dispensary spends a cent on anything, every single transaction needs to be hand recorded and a SAR generated and sent. And it can't be automated. It has to be done by hand, by individual. Think about that for a minute. So
you got to have a personal, one employee for every.
Basically for every account.
Okay.
They're starting to be able to streamline it. And they're starting to be able to, the regulations aren't as draconian as they were. They are still incredibly labor intensive. It takes a lot of time, money, and effort on the part of the bank to make sure that they are in compliance.
Which is one of the things I saw them say, which I was wondering if maybe it was bullshit because I'm not a banker.
I mean,
And
you
they
know,
said, hey,
Google's
we gotta have all these cannabis accounts. We're gonna need time to process all this
every single
cash,
transaction.
maybe, or whatever's coming in,
If they're doing all cash, everything has to be recorded, you know, because they're on the hook for their regulators if anything's fucked up. Now, this is the other major problem and why most banks won't even fuck with it is that FinCEN guidance is not law, it's guidance. I mean, it can be revoked at any time for
So
any
it's not
reason.
carved in stone.
Right. And it does not address liability in the case of negligence. So if a bank employee makes a mistake, what happens? Are they criminally liable? Are they civilly liable? Technically, they're committing money laundering.
Huh.
Nobody knows.
That's a
Nobody's
great question.
prosecuted yet, but that uncertainty, banks don't like uncertainty. Financial institutions
No,
are
they don't.
very conservative. They don't like uncertainty.
Can I ask you, Tim, when I ran into you at this event a couple of weeks ago, you said the banks don't particularly care for you that much.
I mean, it's not that they don't care for me. They don't care for cannabis. And I think at this point, I've gotten something of a reputation. I've formed somewhere in the neighborhood of over 200 Vermont cannabis businesses, CBD, hemp, and adult use over the last 3 years, which, you know, is probably a significant portion. And so, and my name, of course, is all over it. And when they look at the Secretary of State, I'm the incorporator. I have to acknowledge, you know, who formed the company. So I think that they've just, my name has become synonymous with people trying to open up accounts for cannabis, which they should have every right to do. So, and a lot of banks don't have anything to do with this. I had my federal, you know, Vermont Federal's employee credit, or Vermont Federal's credit union account back in 2018 was closed. My TD trading account was closed. I had another bank account.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Do you do your commercial banking with VSECU or any FCU?
Yeah, no, we've been with VSECU now for since I started Vermont Cannabis Solutions. They were the only bank when I started this willing to bank for me, even though I'm just a law firm. I'm not
How
planning.
long ago was that? When did you start banking with them?
2018.
And are they going to charge you these fees and fines?
No, so these fees come into play when a company is plant touching, meaning they have direct involvement in the trafficking of a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance. That is what the law states. Huh. So we as a law firm are merely advisory. We don't sell pot. Now, our new company, that Ojo Rojo distribution will absolutely be subject to any fees.
So you're going to do some wholesale business?
We are. Well, not traditional wholesale. We're going to be packaging, labeling, and distributing, hopefully for the small growers that don't have the, ability or desire to do it themselves.
Nice. Now, this was something that's come up a lot. And I got to tell you, Tim, your name has come up more than any other single person that I've heard of in this entire industry. And but I did want to ask you about the wholesale business because I had a couple trains of thoughts on it. The first one was, well, this guy has every cannabis client in Vermont under his wing, and now he's going to use that to make a bunch of money selling wholesale. The other one is, well, you've provided a valuable services to all your clients. They're all incredibly happy. I haven't met a single fucking person that has a negative thing to say about you. And if you want to make a little money on the side,
I love my clients. Yeah. This is, again, people love to talk. They love to talk. They love to get ideas. I think there was an early member we were thinking about adding to our business plan, who we ultimately decided not to work with, had a very different idea what he wanted to be doing. And I think that got out somehow. And I think people just, of course we're going to use the existing relationship because we're providing a service. Packaging is not cheap or easy. And it's also not 280E deductible for cultivators. While everything else is, that wouldn't be, or at least it's arguable.
What did you just say right there? Is that a tax credit deduction or something?
IRS code 280E. So that is the bane of the cannabis existence. That is an IRS code which prohibits any plant touching company from taking standard business deductions.
Okay.
What you can deduct are cost of goods sold. So normally when you're run a business, you can deduct pretty much anything you spend on the business is taken out of the revenue you bring in before you're taxed on it. You're not going to tax on the money you got to pay for rent, for payroll. I mean, that's silly. You're only taxed on the money that you're actually turning a profit on. Well, with the cannabis industry, that's not the case. You can't deduct things like payroll. So thankfully you can deduct COGS, your cost of the goods that you're selling. So cultivators get hit very lightly, but they still get hit with it, but lightly, because every little of their costs is involved in growing their cannabis. So their time, their labor, the nutrients, their systems, their, HVAC, whatever, that is all directly related. But a cultivator couldn't deduct their administrative costs, invoicing, billing, travel, entertainment, advertising, any of those type of expenses that aren't directly related to the cannabis. But most growers don't have that. Now take the other end of the spectrum is a retail dispensary. Retail dispensary, the only deduction a retail dispensary can take is the wholesale cost of the products coming into the store. They cannot deduct their rent.
But there's also no limit on how much they can push through a dispensary. Is that correct? Because I've talked to a couple of people that are going to own dispensaries, and they said there's no limit on how much product they can send through there.
I mean, you got to stay in by the limits. Adult use in Vermont is an ounce a person. But yeah, stay open as long as you want, run as much as you can.
Right, but like you could sell them 7/8 and all day, and from the way he made it sound to me, there was no limit on how much flower they could push through a dispensary operation.
I mean, again, what I don't know exactly what that means. Of course, the store can sell as much as they can sell.
Okay.
Within the limits. You can't sell over an ounce to a person in a day. It's called looping.
Right.
Leaf in Colorado. Lupin got their both co-CEOs a year in prison. They weren't even on premises when it happened. Lost 16 licenses. Looping's a big fucking deal. They'll go after you for that. But yes, so what it basically does is it puts dispensaries' effective tax rate without 280E mitigation at about 70 to 75%. So for every dollar that comes into that dispensary, 75 cents is going out for taxes. Now, because of the volume,
does that seem like a lot to you?
It's fucking insane, Caleb. This is the only industry in the United States that's subject to this 280E. 280E was implemented after cocaine in 1979 got busted. And
I feel like
tax deductions.
I feel like the nicotine tax in Vermont is like 90% or 92%, but like that.
That's on the nicotine vape cartridges in an attempt to tough out teen vaping. That's a very targeted, specific. This is a national federal law which basically discriminates against cannabis, like no other. And we've tried fighting this thing for the last 6 years, and the tax courts are like, nope, we love it because they're collecting millions. Now, there are ways to mitigate 280E, and good cannabis accountants have spent time studying the cases. There's seminal tax cases. You read them, you see what basically the IRS says you're allowed to do. So you can have a store where you sell CBD and hemp in one half and you sell THC in the other. And as long as they're separately named businesses with separate books, you can share employees, you can share the space. Now you can deduct half your location rent, you can deduct half your payroll, half your utilities.
Yeah.
That's one method. So there's a couple of ways that you can mitigate it and get that tax rate down. But it is really high in dispensaries. Why vertical integration is a great idea. It allows you to manipulate costs yourself in order to be able to maximize revenue where you're seeing the least tax rate.
Well, and I like the vertical integration, but I feel like they should have left a slot open for a Vermont company to get involved in the vertical integration.
Everybody can. You can be vertically integrated.
Are they going to do more licenses? I thought they were only doing the 5 that are already
there's 5 integrated licenses, which allow you to basically have all 5 or 4 rather of the licenses. Wholesale is redundant because cultivation and manufacturing both give you the right to wholesale your product. So wholesale license is only if you want to sell other people's products. You can always wholesale your own. So really, vertical integration in Vermont is cultivation, product manufacturing, and retail. Anybody can get those 3 licenses. That integrated license is $100,000. And that's just a start, plus $50,000 donation, plus then altogether, it probably costs about $250,000. To get a cultivation license, a manufacturing license, and a retail license for you and I, just applying separately and individually, be under $25,000 for all 3. So, I mean, you'd be stupid to get that integrated. Like, even if you were a medical dispensary, it makes more sense, a lot more sense, just to get the retail license as a regular anybody else. There was never any advantage in that, because nobody.
Retail does seem like the way to go if you're just trying to save money.
If
$10 grand and boom.
If you understand 280E, if you have a good strategy to mitigate it, And if you're smart and you understand, you're not going to be able to take deductions. So you limit things like you're not bringing snacks in for all your employees. You're not having people on the payroll sitting around doing nothing. You really are very efficient in your time, in your expenses, and how you go about doing things. That is going to make a successful dispensary. And yes, there's so much money made that even with a 60% tax margin, you're still making a lot of money.
Let me ask you something, Tim.
Definitely.
In this 7 Days article, I saw people talking about, oh, we cashed out our 401k, we cashed out our life savings. Like, do you think that that's a wise investment strategy for people?
This isn't an investment strategy for people, man. Caleb, a lot of times the most satisfying thing for me about my job and about what we managed to do with Vermont Cannabis Solutions, I'm going to tell you right now, the best part for me, we have been working with some of our clients for 2.5, in some cases 3 years, where 2.5 years ago, they walked in our office and said, I got a dream, man. I want to do this. I want to open a dispensary. I want to open a product. I want to make edibles. I want to grow. I've got this great idea. And we've worked with some people, and some of them come on recent, but we've got a big batch where we have seen their dream go from just an idea in our conference room to seeing the build out now, to seeing it all come together. It was the ups, the downs, and seeing these dreams become reality, and seeing the amount of effort, work, and love and passion that people have put into these. And yes, they have begged, borrowed, stolen, pledged, sold blood, sold children. So, they've done everything they can. They've maxed out credit lines. They've, stretched relationships with every relative they have in order to make this happen. So there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of people. But it is happening, and seeing these dreams come true. Meredith Man and Magic Man, for example, is just such a pretty high profile example of just someone who has just taken their dream and made it a reality. And no, we played some little small part helping that happen over and over. Like, that's the best part of what we do, and that's Vermont.
I like Meredith.
Have a local Vermonters market, man. It is
Meredith is cool, man. I liked her.
Meredith is great. Tito, another prime example. Of just, come on, him and Michaela, the work they put in, the time, the effort, but it is going to pay off, but it is stressful.
Do you have another half hour? I'm going to chop this and come back if you got another minute.
Yeah. No, I got all that to do, man. I got nothing going.
All right, wonderful. I'm going to chop this right here. We're going to come back and do another half hour.
Perfect. I love it, man.
Fucking killing, Tim. Yeah. Right. Yeah, as soon as this is rendered, I'll send you another invite. I'll get this up.